And which, by the way, Korea and Vietnam wind up sending more men home traumatized, again, on top of having potential inherited trauma from their fathers. And Vietnam is particularly bad.
Yeah. Yeah, go, if you want another podcast to listen to, go listen to some of the interviews that Sean Ryan has done with Max Sog guys from Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have a time.
Not just because of how violent it was, but the way that the logistics of the military was done at the time was just bad. So, like in the Second World War, you had your company that you were assigned to. And if you all made it out alive by the end of the war, you were all brothers. That's why that show is called Band of Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Because Easy Company started the war together and they finished the war together. And when they got out, they were brothers. They were one. It is a bond that is only forged by fire and combat.
Yep.
In Vietnam, you maybe spent 2 weeks with one company before you're assigned to go someplace else. We sent our entire military force over to Vietnam, and every man in that force was isolated because everybody is having different assignments. Everybody is being yanked around every couple of weeks.
That's a fair point.
So add that on top of
everything else,
the kind of things that were done to our boys and the kind of things they had to do to survive. Because no man can shoot a child that's carrying a bomb and not wind up a little bit messed up and not regret that for the rest of his life. No good man can do that. No slightly decent man can do that. And then when they come home, we have a whole anti-war movement in the United States. When they come home, they get off the plane, they're having rotten fruit thrown at them.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Being yelled at and insulted.
No.
When our boys came home from World War II, everybody cheered. They waved handkerchiefs. They threw their hats in the air. Everybody cheered because we had won. But then when our boys come home from Vietnam, because we just decided to suddenly pull out because the hippies decided that it was a bad thing, they got off the plane and they're treated like they're the bad guy.
Well, in case someone wants to play the unjust work hard, and being a objector and all sorts of stuff, fine.
We might have an episode on the Vietnam War in general because I know the whole history of it anyway.
Sure, but in World War II, at least if you weren't going to cheer for the fact that we won, you could cheer for the fact that we came back, because that is a worthy thing to cheer for, and that's something basic that you ought to do. And in Vietnam, they've even failed that.
Some of the best advice, one of the best things that I've heard is whether or not we think the war is right, we are still sending men to war. And it's not their fault. Whether or not the war is right is not on the men that are fighting it. Or the men that are being used to fight it. So they need the 100% support of their families and of their communities going and coming. When they
Makes
leave
sense.
and when they return, they should be sent off with an embrace and welcomed with an embrace, because thank God you came home. You weren't left dead in a ditch with with missing dog tags.
Yeah.
You weren't remembered by a black flag in front of a government building. Because if I'm not mistaken, there are more unidentified bodies from the Vietnam War than there are of any war before it except the Civil War. I might be mistaken about that. That might actually be World War II. But a lot of our dead are unremembered, and we're just left to die in ditches in that war. So men go over to that war, and they see that, and it is an even worse war than the First or Second World Wars for the individual American men involved. They go over to that war, and then they see that, and they wind up having to leave a man dying in a ditch.
So anyway, they come back from that, and this is nested in with everything else, but
this just compounds everything else.